Welcome to the Bobcast. Today is Valentine's Day, as is attested by Father Ron Mrozinski, who's wearing his red Valentine's Day shirt.
I'm just one big heart.
Big heart. Father Ron Mrozinski, or Ron Mrozinski, as I grew to call him when I was a wee lad of like, oh gosh, Ron, I don't know when we met. I had to have been 12 because that's when we moved into our house on Frederickson Street.
Yeah, I think you were 12, 13. Yep.
Which means you were 16, 17.
Mhm.
And 57 years ago, give or take, you kind of left my life to join the priesthood and dedicate your life to the mission of saving souls and helping souls and being with souls and surrounding yourself with souls. And so about 6 months ago or so, you and I crossed paths again after 57 years. And I have to tell you that it's been a real joy. It's been a real pleasure.
Here too, Bob.
And so, you know, in the last several months, we've done a lot of catching up with each other's lives, but in some of your life, a lot of people that are viewing this are pretty familiar with me and my life, but this is going to reach back into a part of my life that I think is pretty cool. It's pretty fun. We grew up by a big municipal park called Bendix Park. We spent a lot of time. I remember you and I played a lot of tennis at Bendix Park.
Yes, we did.
We did some ice skating at Bendix Park. We pretty much just, spent a lot of time hanging out together. I know you also worked in my parents' flower shop. You and, countless other teenagers, anybody with a driver's license that could
Yes.
opportunity to work there. But when you left to go to the priesthood, you went to the University of Notre Dame, right?
No, I went to St. Louis U. The conventual Franciscans had a house of studies, about 3/4 of a mile from the university campus. And I went there to study for the priesthood. But it was a year there, a year in Auburn, Indiana for novitiate, back to St. Louis. I was, those couple of years, I was in flux a lot between studying, then the novitiate to prepare for vows, then back to St. Louis to study again. And then I remained in St. Louis and got a master's degree, a Master of Divinity and a Master of Arts and Theology. And then I went on to Rome, to the Pontifical Gregorian University, and did my doctoral studies there.
And so you have a PhD in?
It's in biblical theology.
So it is a PhD though, right?
Yes.
I mean, the doctor sometimes doesn't necessarily mean. So you spent a number of years in Rome. How long were you there?
I was there for 5 years.
And in that time, I know you worked on the radio.
Yes. I did some work for Vatican Radio, mainly on weekends because they had a difficult time getting priests who are already tied to parishes to do some work. So I worked there for a little bit.
What'd you do?
I did newscasts, basically. At that time on radio, all you did is you read the script. And the script was either in English or in Spanish or in Italian or whatever language they threw in front of you, because I knew a couple of languages. So they would throw the script in front of me and I would read it. So
that's one of those things, if you do something really well, you're going to end up with it, right? I mean, I know a lot of people, like me, for instance, I'll do my best to make a terrible grilled cheese so that I don't have cheese. In your case, you did it well. There's a lot of intriguing things that you and I have talked about. And one of the things I would appreciate that you might share is a story about the two youngsters that asked you to teach them English.
Yes. they were actually, there were two Italian students, Antonella, who was 16, and Emanuele, who was 14, their brother and sister. They were enrolled at a school in Italy, a public school, and they were learning English, but they had no one to speak with, because basically they were learning the grammar and the vocabulary and the structure of English, but they wanted to learn conversational English. So one day I was in a supermarket called Upim, U-P-I-M, which is a big supermarket chain in Rome. And I was tasked with buying cookies and some espresso coffee and things like that for the little room that we had for some of the Americans who were studying there. After pranzo, the main meal at noontime, we would always go there and have a bit of dessert, if you would. So I was doing that, and I was mumbling under my breath in English, reading the labels of the things I was looking at, which were in Italian. And these two kids walked by me, and they kept on walking. And about a minute later, Emanuele got up enough courage to come and ask me, and he looked at me and he says, "You are Englishman?" I said, "No, I'm an American." He says, "You will speak English with my sister and me?" I said, "Sure." So there we are standing in the supermarket aisle, and I'm asking them a few things, they're asking me a few things, and we're speaking in English, sometimes in Italian, because their grasp of English wasn't that great. So we would lapse back and forth in between English and Italian.
How old were they?
They were, Manuele was 14, Antonella was 16. And so we did that for a little bit. Then they asked me where I lived. And I said, well, I lived just about a block away from the store in this place at the time was called the Seraficum or Collegio Serafico in Italian. And they said, "May we come and speak English with you sometime?" I said, "Sure, that would be fine." Well, I never expected to see them again. I mean, these are teenage kids. You figure, they found somebody to speak English with for a couple of minutes. Now they're gone, and I probably won't see them again. Well, the next day, the brother who was at the portineria is the person who answers the doors, the porter, and he called me and he said, "You have visitors." I said, "I do." I thought to myself, boy, I wasn't expecting visitors. So I went downstairs, and there they were. And they started speaking in English to me. And I said, "Well, come on, we'll go over here. There's a little sitting room. We'll go there and sit, and we can speak." So we did. And they were very intent on learning conversational English. And I said, "Now, wait a minute. You have to help me too." And they said, "With what?" I says, "With conversational Italian." I says, "I've only been here about 6 months or so, and I could use your help with Italian too." So we would speak part of the time in English, part of the time in Italian. Well, excuse me, this would happen 3 or 4 times a week. They'd come, and they wouldn't stay long, maybe half an hour at most, but they really enjoyed it because they got to put into practice what they had learned in their class. Well, a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from their father. His name was Giovanni. And Giovanni was interested in my coming to meet his family, he and his wife primarily. I'm sure he was more interested in who is this man that's talking to my kids, not knowing who I was. And so we talked for a little bit, and he says, "Would you come on Sunday for pranzo?" I said, "Oh, where shall I meet?" He says, "At our apartment." Now, in Italy, as many of you probably know, that most people live in apartments, buildings that are 6, 8, 10, 12 stories high, and private houses are not real common in big cities like Rome. So I went there, and they welcomed me, and very graciously, and I met Giovanni and his wife Adalgisa, and we spoke. And it was about 1 o'clock when I got there. So after a glass of wine, we sat down about 1:15 for pranzo. And this was, to me, I was not expecting to go to their dwelling, to their living place, because in Italy, only close family or very close friends are invited to the house. Otherwise, they will meet you at a restaurant and have pranzo, the main meal, at a restaurant. So I felt very honored to be invited there. And we were talking, and the kids wanted to speak more English, and of course the parents only spoke Italian, and so they would speak Italian. So I was like, if I turned to the right, it was English. So I turned to the left, it was Italian. And we did this for, go ahead. So anyway, I was speaking with them, and one course after another kept on coming out. Now, you have to realize that apartments are pretty small in Italy, and this was a 2-bedroom apartment, and they had a little living area, dining area, and a kitchen that was very, very tiny. And if you've been to Florida, you know what tiny kitchens are like, because most people go out for early bird specials rather than cooking at home. So there's this tiny, tiny kitchen, and stuff is coming out. Like there was the antipasto and the pasta, and then the main course with the contorni, the vegetables and potatoes, and then there was the salad, and then there was the cheese and grapes and fruit, and then there was a little sweet afterwards, a little bit of a cake, and then coffee if you wanted it. Well, this whole repast took us about 3 hours. And I couldn't believe, I thought maybe there was a window in the kitchen and somebody was on the fire escape handing more things to Adalgisa to bring out to the table through the window, because I couldn't believe that she made all this stuff in the kitchen, but she did. So I was getting ready to leave after a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful meal. And they handed me a bustina. A bustina is an envelope. It's a little envelope. Excuse me, a little square envelope. And I thanked them and I put it in my pocket. Well, I was accustomed to receiving something, because if you went to somebody's house or joined somebody, it was their thank you to you for joining them to have a meal. And that's what I expected. I put it in my jacket pocket and went home.
Just to clarify though, that is very Italian, right?
That's very Italian, yes.
Very Italian thing to do. I remember we did growing up, we would do that, something like that.
Yeah, So I went home. Now you have to imagine, the kids are in school. Giovanni is a flower vendor on a corner. He's got a flower stand. And Adalgisa takes in washing and ironing, and that's how they make ends meet as a family. So we're not talking about people who have a great deal of money. So I get home and I open this up, and there's the usual note, but out of it falls a check. And the check was for about 500,000 lira, which at that time was a little over $200. And I was floored. And the note said in Italian from the parents, "Thank you for speaking with our children. Their English grades have improved. We are very grateful." And I thought to myself, I can't take this. I mean, this is a substantial sum of money for this family. I can't do that. So the next morning I saw one of my friends, and I said to him, he was from Naples. And I said to him, I said, "Rocco, I'm sorry, I am accustomed to many things in your culture, but this is one that I can't believe that they gave me this note and they gave me this check." And he said, "Oh, you can't return the check." He said, "That would be an insult." I said, "Oh, come on now." He goes, no, it would be an insult in our culture." I said, "Well, what can I do?" He says, "Ask them for something better." And I said, "Yeah, right. Ask them for something better. I can't do that." He says, "Think about it." So I thought about it for a couple of days, and I called Giovanni and I said to him, can I take you to coffee today? Can we go have coffee around 3:30 this afternoon? And he said, sure. So we went, we had coffee. We're sitting there at this little outdoor table. And I put the envelope, the bustina, down there with the check sticking out by his hand. And he's looking at me and I says, Giovanni, thank you so much. I told him in Italian, but I would like something better. And his eyes got really wide. And he says, "Sí, padre, qualcosa, whatever you want, whatever." I said, money I can spend, but your wife is a wonderful cook. And if she could teach me some of her favorite dishes, I could take them back to the States when I go back and fix them for my family and friends. Well, number one, I think he was very flattered that I thought his wife was a wonderful cook, and she was. And number two, I'm sure he was happy to get his money back. So I got a call on Friday, and his wife was on the phone, and she says, come about 10 o'clock in the morning and help me make dinner. And I said, okay. Well, I think I was over there for about the next 15 weekends in a row, helping her roll out pasta and make sauce and learn how to prepare veal and chicken and things. So I learned how to cook Italian because of these two kids who stopped me in the aisle of the supermarket to ask if I would speak English with them. So
And
that's my story about my Italy experience, that one that I will always cherish.
but you also learned that words matter because you didn't ask for something more, you asked for something better.
Mhm.
And there's a pretty important distinction.
Yes.
You taught Notre Dame students and St. Mary's students language when they did their overseas studies and came to Rome, right?
I taught them philosophy and theology. They had to
But
have had at least a semester of Italian before they came, but I did a lot of remediation with a lot of the students in Italian.
yeah, did you teach them in English or in Italian?
I would, if they were learning Italian, I was teaching them in Italian.
Uh,
If it was something in English that they were studying, I would teach them in English.
it's pretty a little bit intimidating that for someone like me who grew up with an Italian mother, you remember Armida, I'm sure.
Of
Uh,
course.
She was very Italian, but I don't speak any Italian at all. And here I am learning some Italian from a Polish guy. That's really, irony's not lost on me, Father Ron, I'll tell you that.
I can teach you some Polish too.
I bet you can. How many languages do you speak?
5.
Fluently, right?
Pardon?
Fluently.
Fluently, yes.
But you read others. How
Yeah,
many?
I read other languages. I can read German, Romanian, um, um, as long as it's not in a different alphabet. Now I can read Greek, and that's a different alphabet, but that's because I studied Greek for a long time when I was in seminary. Had Latin and Greek and Hebrew, and so I can read a little bit of Hebrew. My Hebrew isn't so good anymore because I don't use it very much, but sometimes I use my Greek a little bit. So
You have done a lot of traveling. We're going to get into the cross Catholic outreach here in just a minute, but your travels, I know it's taken you wide and far and global, and you spent time, I think, in Grenada, in Rome.
yes,
Um,
is Central and South America, Africa, in Kenya and Zambia and Zimbabwe.
Now, do you get assigned those, or do you volunteer for them, or how does that happen?
Usually, first of all, I am now a priest of the Diocese of St. George's, Grenada. So that's my diocese. And so I get there basically to visit my bishop and to check in there and things. Haven't been doing that in the last couple of years because of the pandemic. I went on mission trips and did some things for cross in places like Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador. They were a couple of years ago, and spent some time when I was the custos of my Franciscan province, when I was a Franciscan in Kenya and Zambia and Zimbabwe. And those are the things that took me there. So I've been to quite a few places in the world.
And most recently, although not a short period of time, you traveled quite a bit for Cross Catholic, which
I did. I also took people every other year when I was president of a college up in northern New York. I took people every other year on a trip someplace in the world that they wanted to go. And I told them I'd take them if I could speak the language, I would take them there as long as I spoke the language. So we'd been to France and to Spain and to Italy and Switzerland, Germany. Even I learned a little bit of Hungarian. So when we went to Budapest, I could speak a little bit of Hungarian. A very strange language because it's related to no other language in the world. Magyar is not a relatable language to anything else. About the closest thing we can get some vocabulary and a little bit of grammatical structure is Finnish. But Magyar Hungarian is a very unique language.
now isn't Finnish a derivative of some type from Russia, of Russian?
No, there are some Russian words in it, but Finnish is a language onto its own. It's almost like Magyar, and it has no relatable elements to another language in it.
I mean, I spent some time in Sweden, 6 months on and months off. So I directly worked with a lot of Swedish people. And I never could pick up their language, but what's fascinating about them is that they could go from a meeting in Swedish to English like without a break.
Right. Uh-huh.
English is their
English
second
has been a part of their culture for probably now 3 generations.
Now, when you say
So-
their culture, is that true across the board in a lot of cultures? I mean, for instance,
Some cultures, for example, when I lived in Italy in the 70s, hardly anyone spoke English. Now, if you went there, I would say probably at least, for example, the city of Rome, at least a third of the people would speak some English.
I was in France several years ago. I was on a speaking tour that started out in Denmark and worked its way down. And I gave, I think there were 11 speeches in 14 days. And we got into France, and at that time I was a smoker, so we pulled over to get some gas, and I went inside the gas station to buy some cigarettes, and coming over the loudspeaker was Bruce Springsteen, a Bruce Springsteen song, and clerk was singing the Bruce Springsteen song in English, perfect English.
Mhm.
So when I looked at him and said, "I'd like a pack of Marlboros, please," he acted like he had no idea what I was talking about.
Because they listen to the music and try to pronounce the words the way they are being sung, but that's all they know. They don't know English beyond that.
What are you
Oh,
eating at all? Yeah. Well, and I also learned, one of the things I learned about people in Sweden, back to Sweden, was that they, even though they spoke perfect English because they started to learn it as a second language in the 3rd grade, was they were reluctant to talk to me in front of other people because they didn't want to make a mistake.
yes, uh-huh.
Very, very shy people, which I found to be fascinating because, I like to think I'm a come hither guy, but I can, I have got one word in Swedish, begäri, which stands for brewery. And that's the only word. They have
Well,
breweries.
as long as you could get to the brewery.
As long as I could get to the brewery, make a point. So when you were in Rome, I'm just one more little anecdote here about Rome. I know that when I lived in Washington, D.C., I would get a phone call once a month from somebody who was the brother-in-law of my cousin's sister's next door neighbor's uncle, saying, hey, if you're ever in DC, call Bob. And I would get these calls all the time. Did you run into a lot of your friends, a lot of American people that came to visit Rome and would come to see you while you were living there?
Yes, I would say probably several times a year.
Because I would have been one of them had I known you were there, by the way.
I would have family and friends. One of the stories, my cousin Carol and her mother-in-law at that time, and her brother-in-law, who was very young, he was a teenager then, about 15. And they came to visit me in Rome. And I impressed upon them the fact that since they didn't know the language, stick together. So if we're going to go, and you want to go someplace, tell us where you're going and we'll meet you there if you want to do some window shopping or whatever. But just don't go off by yourself, because it would be difficult for you to find us or us to find you. So the young un, Mitch, decided that while we were all looking at a market, he would go and venture through the market, and he just kept on going. And he was lost for most of the day. And of course, there was a lot of panic and things. And so I was trying to be very systematic about where would a 15-year-old go turned loose by himself during the day in Rome. And eventually I caught up with him. And I was livid, because he just ruined the whole day for everybody, But I told him, I said, you really just kind of made it miserable for everybody, because we were all, well, what are you worried about me for? I says, because this is a different country, you don't speak the language, and you're running off by yourself. Well, I knew where I was. I said, well, then how come you couldn't come back and find us? And he, well, I didn't try. Well, anyway, long story short, he got a little scared, I think, by the fact that he tried to communicate a few times with people, and he couldn't do that because of the language barrier. So he stuck close by us for the rest of the time that we were there. And of course, we always said to him, what would you like to do? And he would tell us, and we would go do something that he would like to do. But I'm sure these three older people tagging along with him kind of curbed his style a little bit.
Well, you know what, at 15 years old, I know when I was 15, I was just a great listener, and I behaved, and, I'm sure whenever I came up, was whatever frustrated, So I want to ask a hard question. And actually, I'm hoping it's harder to ask than it is to answer. But what we hear about the Catholic Church today, outside of what the Catholic Church says, is all about the abuse. And what we hear from the Catholic Church is they apologize, they acknowledge, they're contrite, they ask forgiveness, they do all those things that are right, that they didn't do, they should have done in the first place. But my real question is I know that at the Holy Father level and the cardinal level and the bishop level, that they have a lot of administrative and a lot of public relations and a lot of, but what happens, what's going on with you, with the priest, that priest who is not dealing directly with that entire issue, but you live with it. What's the common wisdom? What's the common thinking? What's the priest do?
Okay. I think by and large, it's a bit demoralizing. Many good priests try their best to do what they can, and that's always in the background. Example, kids will run up to you and they will give you a hug. Little kids they can't grab your chest, so they grab your leg, and there you are. in the midst of things, and there are people hanging on to you. And you do the best you can, and you pat them on the head, and you welcome them. And that would not have been the case before, because I think you would have made the effort to hug them back. But sometimes those things are misinterpreted or misconstrued by people, and you leave yourself vulnerable to that. And that's one of the things I think that really nags at priests, is that the affection that you're being given cannot be given back, at least to the degree that you used to be able to do that, because of what people will think or insinuate because of that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I don't think many priests were in the time that they were in seminary or even before, that they were vetted very well. I often say that sometimes there were many priests who were their mother's vocations. Their mother wanted them to be a priest, and so they went. And whether they were sexually balanced, or whether they were able to find their way through the webs of human sexuality, no one knows, because they were never given that opportunity to do that, especially in relationship to people of the opposite sex. So that became an issue for many. And of course, when you look at children, and you're an authority figure, many children will do exactly what you say. And if it came to the point of acting out, they may feel uncomfortable, but they did that. And then it was discovered. And at that point, I think the biggest point to be made is that many bishops considered that to be sinful, but not criminal. And because of that, people would excuse that, especially the bishops would excuse that and say, well, it was sinful, do some penance, make up for that, and don't do it again. Rather than saying, maybe you need some treatment, and we need to tell the authorities about this, because this has ramifications in the maturation process of a child or young adult.
So they treated it as though it was something that is in the family.
Yeah, it was a moral failing, but not necessarily a criminal activity.
Yeah. Okay.
And they received, a lot of bishops were in the same boat, that they were priests and they became bishops, and they never, endured any of this. And so they were at a loss for how to treat this too. And they would rely on psychologists. In fact, there is a place, there's several places in the country where priests are sent to rehabilitate if one's sexuality or one's ability to relate to people can be rehabilitated, and they're sent there, and psychologists and doctors tell them, well, they're at the point right now where they can deal with the public, and then this happens again. And I think that's what the bishops thought, that if they sent them there and they spent X thousands of dollars in this process, that they would come back and they'd just be fine. But as you know, that takes an awful long time, if it's able to be done at all. And many were put back into ministry, unfortunately, not being at a point in their life where they could handle those kind of relationships.
You learned you learned some diplomacy along the way too, Padre.
I did.
Very good answer. Very diplomatic and very honest. Because we, like I said, we hear about it on the news, or we read about it on the news, and we all tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, it's like
Mm-hmm.
several hundred priests committed egregious acts. And so now, therefore, all priests have created egregious acts.
Right.
And, we're all victims of that,
Mm-hmm.
one way or another, so.
And
Well,
the other part of that is that so many people have left the church behind in their life, realizing that, one of the basic definitions of church for me is we are a community of the sinners and the forgiven. That at the same time we have sinned, we also ask for forgiveness and are asked for forgiveness by people, because that's who we are. I mean, that's the reason Jesus suffered and died and rose for us, so that we could have that forgiveness. But sometimes people expect that there would be a an unbending kind of way of looking at church discipline, and that's what we have as church discipline: sacrament of reconciliation, sacrament of forgiveness, and the fact that, yes, we should hold priests and bishops and people of that ilk to a higher standard. But what happens when that you betray that and you fail? There has to be some way of looking at some kind of reconciliation for them, and some justice for the people who have been offended.
Huh. And philosophical. There you go. I am very touched by your answer and your honesty. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's, as is tradition with the Bobcast, I always ask the guest if they will mind talking about their favorite charity. And I'm always then the first one to make a $50 contribution to that charity, as a way of both thanking the guest and also of satisfying my interpersonal desires to do good. So, as a part of your life, your recent life, what you do for a living, and it's interesting that people probably don't realize that you do have a living, that you earn a living, and so. But as a part of what you do is that you work for a group called the Cross Catholic Organization.
Yeah, Cross Catholic Outreach.
Cross Catholic Outreach. One of the things that was interesting to me about what you do, and it was cool because right after you and I reconnected at your home in Florida, the very next week or 2 weeks later, you were coming to Indianapolis to celebrate Mass and to spell a priest who needed a vacation. Explain that.
Cross Catholic Outreach was founded 21 years ago to be able to link parishes in this country with the needs of the poorest of the poor around the world, which means that we help people in dire poverty in areas of the world that are very hard to reach sometimes. And we do this via feeding programs and education, medical programs, micro enterprise, just various kinds of ways we can help people get up on their feet and stay on their feet, and have them develop spiritually and materially and psychologically to have that dignity again that they should have as children of God. So I finished 10 years as president of a college up in northern New York. And I came to Florida because a friend of mine said, you're missing out on a lot of nice warm weather, and northern New York is not where you want to be in the wintertime. So I came down to Florida, and Jim Kavanaugh, who founded Cross, called me up and he says, Father Ron, can we have lunch? I said, sure, Jim. Now, I had known Jim from Notre Dame days, but I said, sure. And I'm going, why does Jim want to have lunch with me? And he explained to me that he had just founded an international aid organization called Cross Catholic Outreach, and he needed some help. And I said, well, what kind of help do you need? He says, well, I know that you had to do a lot of fundraising as a college president. And so I need somebody to, number one, I need a priest to go to parishes to get the message out. I need somebody to work with major donors. I need someone to help develop a planned giving program and estate planning program. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, which of those would you like me to do? And he paused and he looked at me and he said, all of them? I said, well, he said, just a year or two, just a year or two. Can you give me a year or two? I said,
Oh, he put the big bite on you. It's only temporary.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, that was
You didn't
21
do
years ago,
that, huh?
and I'm still doing that.
How many
And
years ago?
21.
Well,
So I'm still doing that. And people ask me, why are you doing that? And I keep telling them it's because the need is so great.
to be
I just
clear,
can't imagine myself being able to go to bed at night and sleep without thinking that, some of God's people are not taken care of at all. So I have continued to do this. I'm on a very short-term medical leave right now because of having to deal with some cancer issues and radiation and things. But by mid-March, I'm hoping to get back to doing this. I go to parishes almost every weekend to speak on behalf of Cross Catholic Outreach. And luckily, with the priest shortage, there are a lot of priests who want to make a retreat, who want to take a vacation, who have family things like weddings and baptisms to attend. And they can't find anybody to come and celebrate the sacraments for them for a weekend. So luckily, Cross is able to provide a priest. There are over 40 of us who do this on a weekly basis, who go to parishes and tell people about the mission and ministry of Cross Catholic Outreach and ask them for their help in some form. So we are able to be helpful to a parish, at the same time ask people if they can be helpful to us by sponsoring something that we do, helping us to do that, or in some ways by organizing a group of prayer for us. There are people, would you believe, who make rosaries and give us boxes of rosaries because it's what they can do to help promote the spiritual aspect of Cross. And they send us the rosaries so that we can distribute them among the people with whom we work. So those are the kind of things that Cross does. We have major feeding programs. We are heavily into education. We are heavily into micro enterprises where people are given small loans, and those loans take care of getting their business up and running. And the business can be as simple as weaving. They weave at home and they want to sell these to a global market, but they have no way of doing that. And so we give them, for example, all you need is a computer with a web page and people around you to help you set up the aspects of a business, and they're off and running. And this has transformed families and communities. And people say, how can you do this? I mean, you look at all this poverty, how do you do it? I says, you go one person, one family at a time. And that family, that person helps another person, another family. It's like an avalanche once it gets started, because you realize that there are opportunities for people that they don't even know that they have.
Well, and if you recognize that a lot of the issues are systemic, I know that, for instance, there's a charity, global charity located in Indianapolis called the Crystal House Foundation. And they set up schools. There are, I think, 7 around the world, and they put them in the poorest neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
They teach reading, writing, arithmetic the way they should. But then there's an after-school program where they teach things like hygiene, how you brush your teeth, those types of basic human service needs.
Right.
That, and they will also then provide a toothbrush, a toothpaste for every member of the family. So the
Mhm.
kid will go home and teach their parents how to brush their teeth, how to take a shower, how to take a bath, how to clean up, how to, basic hygiene, and those living skills that are required to help break those systemic issues. And so if I want to give money, I would go to crosscatholic.org, right? Which
Yes. Mhm.
I'm going to do this afternoon. So, Father, people may want to reach out to you, and if they do, your email is there on the bottom.
Yes.
Where are you going to be for Easter? You're going to be in South Bend? You're going to be
No,
Where are
I'll
you
be here. I'll be here for Easter.
staying there?
Uh-huh.
Well, golly, maybe we could get you to Indianapolis one of these holidays and holy days.
Okay.
I'm going to be down in that neck of the woods the first week in May. There's a convention, American Resort Development Association, which is a trade group that I belong to that represents the resort industry, and their convention's coming up in Hollywood, Florida. So
You said
I
in
know
May?
we'll get together then. Yeah,
Okay. Just
first
let me know when. Okay.
first week in May.
Okay.
Now, if you would do me a favor and just hold on for a second, and I'm going to stop the recording. And thank you, Father, for joining us, and thank you for sharing your life with all of us. And particularly, thank you for being my friend. It's been so wonderful getting back with you.
Thank you, Bob. It's been wonderful on this end too.
Hang on a second. Thank you, everybody.